Would we really be able to control our emotions if we died and came back to life just like Subaru Natsuki? It sounds like something out of a nightmare, doesn't it? Well, for Natsuki Subaru from ReZero, it's not just a nightmare, it's his reality. Subaru's return by death ability is a mix of blessing and curse. On one hand, he can come back to life and try to make things right. On the other hand, he has to endure death in some truly horrific ways. Can you picture what it must feel like to die over and over again? It's hard to imagine. Each death takes a massive toll on Subaru's mind, breaking him down more than once. But somehow, he always finds the strength to pick himself up and keep going. Why does he do it? Because through all these deaths, he's usually able to find a better outcome. It's a tough journey, but he's determined to see it through. But what would you do if you knew your death would reset time? Would you really be able to control your emotions if you died and came back to life just like Subaru? Would you have the courage to keep going like Subaru? Even when faced with horrifying scenarios, Subaru presses on. Whether it's being frozen to death by Puck or eaten alive by a swarm of rabbits, he endures it all. But can we? So, let's start with what really happens inside our minds as we approach the end of our lives. It's a profound question that has intrigued scientists and philosophers for ages. But, before that, do you know a surefire way to defy death? I bet you're thinking it's some ancient secret or a magical potion. Well, get ready, because I've got the ultimate life hack for you. There's only one thing that can bring you back from the brink of the afterlife. And it's not a mystical amulet or a deal with a tricky genie. It's way simpler than that. Ready for the secret? If you subscribe to this channel, a chakra gets activated within you and you gain the power of return by death. Yes, you heard that right. Just click that subscribe button and bam, you're practically immortal. So, what are you waiting for? Subscribe right now. Save yourself from the usual hassles of life-threatening adventures. No need for dramatic last words or overly emotional goodbyes. Just a simple click and you're back in the game. Don't leave your fate to chance. Join the Immortality Club today. Now, back to the video. When we think about death, we often picture the heart stopping, marking the end. Time of death is usually considered the moment when a person goes into cardiac arrest. This means the heart stops, and with it, the electrical impulses that keep it beating cease. But what happens to our brain and our thoughts in those critical moments? Does everything shut down instantly, or is it a gradual process? Scientists have been exploring this question, particularly through the study of near-death experiences. You've probably heard stories of people seeing a tunnel of light or feeling a sense of peace when they're close to death. But what's really going on inside the brain during these moments? One remarkable discovery is that, just before brain death, there's a surge of electrical activity. In a 2013 study involving rats, researchers found that the animals entered a hyper-alert state right before they died. This suggests that the brain might be more active in those final moments than we previously thought. So, why does this happen? Some scientists think it's due to reduced blood flow combined with unusual electrical activity in the brain. This could explain the vivid experiences reported during near-death experiences. Many of these individuals described floating above their bodies, watching medical teams work on them, and even recalling conversations and visual details that they shouldn't have been able to perceive. Now, here's where things get really exciting. Even after the heart stops, the brain remains conscious for about 2 to 20 seconds. This is the time it takes for the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain responsible for thinking and decision-making, to run out of oxygen. During this brief window, people might still be aware of their surroundings. What happens next? The brainstem reflexes, like the gag and pupil reflexes, disappear. The brain waves from the cerebral cortex become undetectable, but this doesn't mean the brain shuts down immediately. It can take hours for the brain to completely cease functioning. When CPR is performed, it provides a small amount of oxygen, around 15% of what's needed for normal brain function. However, the process of brain cell death continues, albeit at a slower pace. The research also looks at survivors of cardiac arrest to understand their experiences. By studying these individuals, he hopes to learn more about the brain's activity during death and revival. Now, if you're a fan of ReZero, you know just how gruesome some of Subaru's deaths have been. His first death is quite unforgettable. After being transported to a new world, Subaru meets a half-elf named Satella. While trying to help her retrieve a stolen insignia, Subaru encounters an assassin named Elsa. Before he can react, Elsa slices his stomach open. Subaru reaches out to Satella, then suddenly wakes up in front of a vendor's stand. This was the first time his return by death power activated. Do you think it got any easier from there? Not at all. In fact, his second death happens in the same episode. Subaru returns to the hideout, hoping to get the insignia back. This time, Elsa attacks suddenly, killing everyone in the room, including Subaru. Once again, he resets to the vendor's stand. Subaru's third death is equally brutal. While trying to track down the thief who stole Satella's insignia, he gets stabbed by thugs and left to bleed out in an alley. He dies there, resetting yet again. Can you believe that a simple puppy could cause a death? In episode 4, Subaru is bitten by a puppy in a village. He later dies in his sleep and wakes up once more. Each death is a fresh start, but the trauma builds up. Some of Subaru's deaths are caused by people he trusts. In one instance, after a long string of tragic events, he is tortured by Rem and then mercy killed by her sister, Ram. He even jumps off a cliff at one point, promising himself that he'll find a better ending. Perhaps one of the most tragic moments is when Subaru stabs himself in the throat to reset time, hoping to save Rem, only to realize that it's too late to help her. Despite all these gruesome deaths, Subaru's determination never wavers. And to answer the question, would we really be able to control our emotions if we died and came back to life just like Subaru Natsuki, we would have to go to the stories of near-death experiences. Have you ever heard stories about people who have had near-death experiences? Some say they came back with a newfound appreciation for life, feeling more resilient and less afraid of death. It's 1994 and Tony Chicoria, an orthopedic surgeon, is on a trip at a lake house. Just an ordinary day, right? He decides to call his mom from a payphone. They hang up, and just as he's about to leave, something incredible happens. A blue flash appears out of nowhere. Tony didn't even realize a lightning storm was coming. Suddenly, he feels his body being thrown backward. Confusingly, he also feels it moving forward at the same time. Imagine his shock when he turns around and sees his own body lying on the ground. I'm dead, he thinks. No emotion, just a simple realization. As Tony watched a woman start CPR on his lifeless body, he felt himself floating up the stairs. He saw his kids getting their faces painted and felt a reassuring calm. They would be okay. Then, he was surrounded by a bluish-white light and an overwhelming sense of peace. His life's highest and lowest moments flashed before him, and he felt as if he was being pulled upward at an incredible speed. Just as he was marveling at the glorious feeling, he slammed back into his body. What would you think if that happened to you? Here's something even stranger. The doctor who revived Tony developed an intense urge to play and write piano music after the incident. Weird, right? This is what a near-death experience feels like, according to science. Now, let's fast forward to 2006. Meet Anita Morjani, a woman who fought a tough 4-year battle with lymphatic cancer. One day, she slipped into a coma and doctors were certain it was the end for her. But Anita's story takes an unexpected turn. While in her near-death state, she felt a consciousness that baffled science. She described floating above her body with a 360-degree peripheral vision of the hospital room and beyond. Though she couldn't see her late father, Anita felt his presence and heard his message. He said that I've gone as far as I can, and if I go any further, I won't be able to turn back, she recalled. Despite the warning, Anita didn't want to return. The pain, discomfort, and fear had all vanished, replaced by an incredible feeling of unconditional love. How powerful must that feeling be to not want to come back? 30 hours after slipping into a coma, Anita woke up. In just 2 days, her organs started functioning again, and her tumors began to shrink. Today, she is cancer-free and a public speaker and author. However, it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Many people also suffer from PTSD, anxiety, or depression after such traumatic events. So what would happen if someone like Subaru repeatedly experienced death? Would they become emotionally stronger, or would they crumble under the constant trauma? Emotional regulation plays a huge role here. Some people might become desensitized to fear and anxiety, learning to regulate their emotions better each time they return. But imagine the opposite. What if the repeated trauma only made things worse, leading to increased emotional instability? It's a coin toss, and the outcome could vary from person to person. Next, consider the cognitive and neurological changes. Have you heard of neuroplasticity? It's the brain's amazing ability to reorganize itself. If someone repeatedly faced death and came back, their brain might adapt, altering how they respond emotionally. What would that look like? Perhaps their memory and learning processes would change, influencing how they react to future events based on their past experiences. But repeated exposure to death could lead to deeper existential awareness. It might make someone more reflective, altering their perspective on what truly matters. Or it could profoundly change their sense of self. Comparing this to Subaru's journey in the series, his experiences are designed to be dramatic and intense, often driven by supernatural circumstances. His emotional control evolves as he faces increasingly challenging situations. But could we really apply this to the real world? Fiction allows for controlled, exaggerated scenarios that don't adhere to real-world limitations. In reality, the conditions and consequences would be far more complex and unpredictable. So, what do you think? Can we learn something valuable from Subaru's fictional experiences, or is it just too far removed from reality? Exploring these questions helps us appreciate the delicate balance of our psychological and emotional well-being. It also reminds us of the profound impact that life's extreme experiences can have on our minds and hearts. So, if you somehow come back from the dead, there's a 90% chance that you'll be a hot mess. So, while you're still among the living, make the most of it. Eat that extra slice of cake, laugh until your stomach hurts, and of course, love anime.